Welcome to the Fear Files. In every small town, there's a place where the ordinary meets the mysterious. A quiet street, where the sun sets behind rows of houses and neighbors greet each other with familiar smiles. But what happens when someone new moves in? A stranger in a place where everything is supposed to be known. A house that has been empty for years suddenly comes to life again, and with it, strange occurrences begin to unfold. This is the story of a new neighbor, a man who appeared out of nowhere and whose presence would slowly unravel the fabric of peace that once held the neighborhood together. A man whose secrets could never remain hidden for long. Tonight, join me as we uncover the unsettling tale of the new neighbor, where the line between curiosity and fear blurs, and where an ordinary street becomes a place of shadows, whispers, and dark mysteries. Are you ready to uncover the truth? Or will the mystery be too much to bear? It was the kind of quiet evening that could only be found in a small town where everyone knew each other's name, their business, and their stories. I had lived in this town for most of my life, and its familiar streets, warm greetings, and routine pace made it feel safe. Until the day the new neighbor moved in. The house next door had been empty for months. It wasn't a big house, but it was the only one on the block that had been abandoned for years, leaving the neighborhood with an eerie quietness. I'd always wondered why no one had moved in. Was it the location, tucked away behind large, overgrown trees? Or perhaps it was the fact that its owner, a reclusive man who no one had ever met, had mysteriously disappeared one autumn evening, leaving no trace. Then, one Saturday morning, I saw a moving truck pull up outside the house. A tall, middle-aged man stepped out, his face obscured by the shadows of his hoodie. He looked around briefly, as if assessing the place, and then started unloading boxes and furniture. I didn't think much of it at first. After all, people moved in and out of the neighborhood all the time. But something about the man struck me as odd. There was a certain coldness in his movements, as if he didn't want to be noticed. Yet something about his presence felt unsettling. A few days passed and I didn't see him much. Just the occasional glimpse of him moving around in the yard or inside the house through the window. It was as if he was trying to keep a low profile, avoiding any sort of interaction with the rest of the neighborhood. That was fine with me. I wasn't exactly eager to make small talk with someone who clearly wasn't interested in getting to know anyone. But then, strange things began to happen. It started small, little things I could easily dismiss. The lights in his house would flicker on and off at odd hours of the night. I chalked it up to old wiring, but it became a nightly occurrence. Then I noticed the blinds in his living room window, always drawn tightly shut, never a sliver of light escaping through them. For a house that was supposed to be occupied by a single man, it seemed strangely dark and lifeless. One evening, curiosity got the better of me. I decided to introduce myself. I baked a fresh loaf of bread, something I knew would be hard to refuse, and walked across the street with a polite smile on my face. As I knocked on his door, I could hear movement inside, but it took an unusually long time for him to answer. When he finally did, I was taken aback. The man looked older up close, his face pale and gaunt. His eyes were a dull shade of blue, almost devoid of life. He didn't seem surprised to see me, nor did he seem pleased. "Hello," I said, trying to keep the conversation light. "I live across the street. I just wanted to welcome you to the neighborhood." He nodded without saying much. His voice was quiet, almost too quiet, as if he didn't want to speak at all. "Thanks," he muttered, glancing at the bread in my hands. "I'm not really much for company, but I appreciate it." There was an awkward silence, and before I could say anything more, he turned away and closed the door softly behind him. I stood there for a moment, bewildered, then turned and made my way back home. His behavior was strange, but I figured I had done my part. After all, Everyone was entitled to their privacy. But after that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Over the next week, the oddities escalated. I began noticing faint noises coming from his house late at night. Whispers, as if someone was talking to themselves in the dark. And one night, I heard the unmistakable sound of glass breaking, followed by an eerie silence. It unsettled me, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions. Perhaps the man had a broken window, or maybe he was just clumsy. One evening, as I sat on my porch, I saw him standing at his window, staring out into the street. His expression was unreadable, and there was something haunting about the way he looked. Like he was watching, waiting for something, or someone. I tried to ignore the growing unease in my stomach, but every night, the feeling grew stronger. It wasn't just me. Several other neighbors had begun to talk, and whispers about the new neighbor spread like wildfire. Some said they saw strange shadows moving behind his windows at night. Others claimed they had heard strange noises coming from his house at odd hours, like the sounds of someone dragging something heavy across the floor. Then these strange occurrences took a darker turn. One evening, I was coming home from the grocery store when I noticed a faint light flickering in the upstairs window of his house. The blinds were wide open, and for the first time since he moved in, I could see inside. The room was dimly lit, but it was what I saw that made my blood run cold. There, standing in the middle of the room, was the man, but he wasn't alone. A dark, indistinct figure stood next to him, its outline faint, as though it was made of shadow. The figure appeared to be whispering something in the man's ear, and he nodded, as if in agreement. I froze. My heart raced as I took a step back, my mind trying to process what I had just seen. But as soon as I blinked, the figure was gone. The man was alone in the room again, and the lights went out. The next morning, I decided to confront him again, though I wasn't sure what I was expecting to find. When I knocked on his door, there was no answer. I tried again, and still no answer. It was unlike him to be so distant, especially after our brief encounter. I walked around the back of the house and peeked through the window. What I saw made my blood run cold. The room that had seemed empty just hours before was now in complete disarray. Furniture overturned, books scattered across the floor, and in the center of the chaos, I could see a large, dark stain on the carpet. I quickly stepped back, my heart pounding in my chest. Something was terribly wrong. The next day, I called the police, but by the time they arrived, the house was empty. The man had vanished without a trace, leaving no sign of his departure. The only thing that remained was the eerie silence and the unsettling feeling that something unnatural had happened in that house. A few days later, I learned from one of the older residents that the house had a dark history, one that went back long before the man had moved in. Apparently, there had been rumors about the house being cursed, that previous tenants had met strange fates. Some had disappeared without a trace, while others had gone mad. I didn't know what to make of it all. Had I witnessed something supernatural? Was the man really just a reclusive neighbor? Or had he been trying to escape something darker? No one ever spoke of the new neighbor again. The house remained empty, just as it had been for years before. But every now and then, I could still feel his presence lingering, watching, waiting, just beyond the reach of the light. And sometimes on quiet nights, when the wind rustles through the trees and the shadows stretch long across the street, I wonder if he's still out there, hiding in plain sight, just waiting for the next unsuspecting soul to move in.
For more videos, please subscribe.